the day Burkina took back the sky. The sound came first, a deep, rolling thunder slicing through the morning air. Jet engines. Power. Freedom. October 30th, 2025. Ouagadougou International Airport. The sun burned bright above the tarmac, and the city seemed to hold its breath. Thousands gathered behind the barriers, faces lifted, phones raised, flags fluttering in the heat. The air was thick with anticipation. And then on the horizon, it appeared. A sleek white Embraer 190, gleaming like a promise, descending gracefully toward home. The crowd erupted, not for the metal and the machinery, but for what it meant. Because this wasn't just a plane, this was Air Burkina, reborn. Once it had been the nation's pride. Then its heartbreak. Years of silence, of borrowed skies, of lost identity. But on that morning, when the jet's wheels kissed the runway, something shifted. You could feel it. A tremor that rippled through the crowd. Part relief, part disbelief. A collective whisper seemed to rise with the dust. We made it. It wasn't about luxury. It wasn't about spectacle. It was about restoration, about taking back a dream that had been grounded for far too long. For decades, the world had called Burkina Faso landlocked, as if borders could cage a people's spirit. But that word was always wrong. Standing on Burkinabe soil, you realize this nation isn't locked by land, it's linked by it. To Mali, to Ghana, to Niger, to Côte d'Ivoire, to Togo, arteries of a living, breathing continent. And now, once again, connected through flight. Under Captain Ibrahim Traore's leadership, Air Burkina's revival became more than an aviation project. It became a declaration, a statement of self-reliance. A reminder that sovereignty begins not just on the ground, but in the sky. As the Embraer taxied across the runway, the flag on its tail caught the sun, red, green and gold, glinting like fire. A quiet message to the world: we no longer borrow our wings. Around the airport, people wept, smiled, saluted and recorded. Some stood in silence, not because they had no words, but because words weren't enough. That day, history didn't arrive with fanfare. It landed softly, on its own runway. And when the engines died and the doors opened, it wasn't just passengers stepping out. It was Burkina Faso's confidence returning home. You see, that's what makes this moment so powerful. It's not about the technology, it's about what it represents. Sovereignty, movement, dignity, the power to decide your own direction. But how did it happen? How does a forgotten airline rise from the ashes? To understand that, you have to go back to when Air Burkina was little more than a memory. Founded in 1967, it once symbolized the pride of an independent nation. Then came the slow decay, bureaucracy, debt, foreign dependence. By 2023, the planes were grounded, the flag folded away in dusty hangars. It wasn't just an airline's collapse, it was Burkina Faso's silence in the sky. Then came Captain Ibrahim Traore, young, fearless and tired of old excuses. He looked at Air Burkina and didn't see a failure. He saw potential. The problem isn't that we can't, he said. It's that we've been told we can't. In 2024, he appointed Azakaria Traore as CEO, a man known for results, not rhetoric. His first words set the tone. We don't need to impress the world. We just need to serve our people and serve them well. That shift changed everything. No more chasing giants like Air France or Emirates. Air Burkina would master its own sky. Regional routes, reliable service, local pride. With government backing, the airline rebuilt, smarter, leaner, stronger. Maintenance centers reopened, new deals were struck, trust was restored. And when the Embraer 190 arrived, it wasn't about prestige, it was about purpose. Efficient, affordable, ours. A symbol that Burkina Faso no longer borrows its wings, it builds them. Burkina started small, test flights, local hiring, community trust. No slogans, just service. And slowly, it worked. By late 2024, optimism was back in the air. You could see it in people's eyes. Air Burkina had become more than an airline. It was a symbol of recovery, of pride, of Africa rebuilding itself without waiting for Western approval. But why the Embraer 190? Because Burkina Faso chose sense over show. While others flaunt Boeings and Dreamliners, Burkina chose what fit. The E190 isn't about grandeur, it's about logic. Sleek, compact, built for Africa's terrain. It carries about 98 passengers, needs no massive runways, and runs efficiently across short and medium routes, the heartbeat of regional travel. Progress isn't about being the biggest, it's about being the smartest. The E190 saves fuel, cuts maintenance costs, and keeps flights consistent. exactly what the nation needed. Inside, it's simple but dignified. Clean leather seats, soft lighting, calm comfort. Not luxury, but identity. A place where Burkinabe passengers can say, "This feels like us." And the best part? It's owned, not leased. No foreign middlemen, no hidden strings. When Air Burkina takes off now, it flies on its own terms, with its own assets, its own pilots, its own engineers. That's not just independence, that's freedom with wings. Air Burkina's rebirth wasn't just about planes, it was about purpose. The company restructured around performance, local training, and real service. Every flight became a message: we can do this ourselves. The Embraer 190 symbolized that spirit, efficient, proud, African. But a plane means nothing without the sky it connects. For decades, Africa's air routes were built for outsiders, not Africans. Colonial maps forced travelers to fly through Europe just to reach their neighbors. That wasn't logistics, that was control. Air Burkina is rewriting that story. The new routes, Ouagadougou to Bamako, Niamey, Abidjan, Cotonou, are more than destinations, they're reconnections. Each flight reclaims a piece of Africa's mobility and sovereignty. Now, traders, students and families can move freely, faster, cheaper, on African terms, because connectivity is power. And when Africa owns its sky, it owns its future. Of course, resistance remains. Foreign airlines fear losing control. Critics whisper about safety and capacity. But Burkina Faso's message is simple. We're done being passengers in our own story. Partnership, yes. Dominance, no. Africa isn't closing its skies, it's reclaiming them. So when an Air Burkina jet lifts off from Ouagadougou and lands in Lomé or Dar es Salaam, it's not just a flight, it's an act of defiance. A quiet revolution saying Africa no longer orbits around Europe, it's building its own gravity. But ambition meets reality. Running an airline isn't poetry, it's pressure. Every route, every litre of fuel, every delay costs money. And in Africa, everything costs more. Fuel, parts, even time. Still, Air Burkina pushes forward. Under CEO Azakaria Traore, the focus is simple: stability before speed. No flashy long hauls, no reckless expansion. Just strong regional routes, reliable service, and loyalty at home. Trust is the hardest runway to rebuild. After years of silence, passengers had doubts, so the airline is investing in people. Local pilots, engineers, cabin crews, trained and trusted in Burkina Faso. Maintenance is moving home too, cutting costs and building pride. Pricing remains the tightrope. Too high, you lose the people. Too low, you lose the company. But this time, the math isn't just about profit. It's about proving that Burkina Faso can fly, and stay flying, on its own terms. Air Burkina is learning the hardest lesson in aviation: balance. Affordable fares for Africans who travel often, but profitable enough to survive. It's not easy, but it's progress, and competition is heating up. For decades, foreign airlines, Western and Middle Eastern, treated Africa as a guaranteed profit zone. Now, with Air Burkina rising, that monopoly is being challenged. Of course, that means tension, quiet pushback disguised as partnership. But Ouagadougou's message is clear: collaboration, yes; control, never. Still, nothing is guaranteed. Aviation success isn't owned, it's earned daily. One mistake, one crisis, one fuel spike, and everything can fall. But this isn't just about business, it's about belief, proving that an African nation can build a clean, competent, world-class airline without dependency. And here's the real question: what if it works? What if Air Burkina's quiet revolution inspires others, a blueprint for a truly African sky? One spirit, one future. Across the continent you can feel it. The hum of new engines in Addis Ababa, the echoes of departures in Kigali, the cheers of arrivals in Dar. Slowly, Africa's skies are being reclaimed by African hands. The world didn't expect that. For years, they said Africa couldn't sustain its own airlines. Too risky, too costly. But Air Burkina proved otherwise. Africans are done being passengers in their own story. Now they're writing new flight plans, connecting their people on their own terms. From Ethiopian's might, to Rwanda's precision, to Air Senegal's reach, and Air Burkina's rebirth in the Sahel, each airline is adding its voice to a growing continental chorus. A chorus of confidence. Imagine it. A student in Ouagadougou flying to Accra to study. A trader from Bamako reaching Cotonou in hours, not days. A Burkinabe engineer attending a conference in Kigali without ever touching European soil. This isn't just convenience, it's integration. Every route shortens the distance that history once stretched. Every partnership between African carriers repairs what colonialism divided. And when a Burkina Faso pilot takes off in an African-owned jet crossing African skies, that's more than a flight. That's sovereignty in motion. Because independence isn't a date, it's every takeoff that happens without permission. But that's okay, because the change is real, and it's rising from within. No foreign donors. No outside dictates. Just Africans believing in their own wings again. When that trust takes flight, in their pilots, in their companies, in their people, that's when transformation truly begins. So next time you hear the roar of a jet over Ouagadougou, look up. That's not just Air Burkina, that's Africa, reborn. Red and green against the sky, defying gravity and rewriting history, a continent whispering, we're not waiting anymore. As the Embraer 190 fades into the Sahel horizon, you can't help but wonder, maybe this isn't just an airline's return. Maybe it's the first chapter of Africa finally owning its skies and its destiny. Do you think Africa is ready to control its own skies? Tell us in the comments. And if you want more stories like this about black culture, power and history, hit subscribe and ring the bell, because we're bringing the truths nobody else dares to tell.